Welcome everybody. Welcome to today's Wednesday Ed to Ed ANZ webinar. This is the second webinar of the series. Already week 3 of the term here in New South Wales, and I can see everybody coming in. So welcome everybody, and hello to anybody that could be listening to the recording as well. My name is Kendall Havenstein and I'm the Smart ANZ Marketing and Operations Manager. I will be here today I will be here in the background supporting today's presenter. I will be here answering any questions and then I'll be back I'm going to do a quick open up of the webinar and then I'm going to do a quick wrap up at the end. So today we've got literacy and language analysis using Smart Notebook. So with your control panel, if you need to shrink it down, you can do so by clicking on the white and orange arrow. It'll shrink it down to the size here that you can see on the right. If you need to pop it out, you just push the orange and white arrow again. So for questions, I will be here to answer any questions that come throughout, especially if there's any technical difficulties. I can definitely jump on those straight away. If you don't receive an answer from me straight away, it's just because I know that either your question's going to be answered as the presentation naturally unfolds, or I'm going to save it up because I think it's a good question to ask at the end when we have question time 5 to 10 minutes before the end of this webinar. So there's 2 ways you can ask questions. So throughout, I encourage you just to type them into the question panel, and then I will type back an answer. And then at the end, if you would like to come off mute and ask your question that way, you can do so. You just push on the hand with the green arrow and I will take you off mute and you can ask that way, but we will save the coming off mute to ask the presenter questions directly for the end, and then throughout you can type, and also of course at the end if you have any questions you can also type. You don't have to come off mute, that's just the option if you would like to. So you can earn a attendance certificate for this webinar if you log into train.smarttech.com. Click on the certification blue box learn more button in the middle there, and then navigate to this webinar, and then at the end of this webinar there'll be a purple mark complete button that you can see here circled in red down in the bottom left, and then it will automatically generate you a PDF certificate with your name on it as long as you're logged into train.smarttech.com. So if you registered for last week's webinar, you would have noticed that you now actually receive an email with the webinar recording with the certificate link at the end. So I am now sending that out. I think I aim to send it out the Tuesday or the Wednesday the following week of the live webinar. So I send that to whatever email address you use to register for this webinar. You will then receive it there, or you can just log into train.smarttech.com and get that when you're ready as well. Okay, I would now like to introduce today's presenter. So today we have Chris Ransom, Head of Training Development at Integrate AV. Chris was a teacher at tertiary and secondary levels for 13 years. His main subjects were ancient Greek and Latin languages and literature and philosophy. And he is also a SMART certified trainer. You can also contact Chris via email. His email is just there underneath his profile photo. It's chris.ransom@integrateav.com.au. And you can also reach out to me with any questions, and I can also forward you on to Chris if need be, if you missed this email. Okay, now I'll hand it over to Chris. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thank you very much, Kendall. It's lovely to be here. Hi, everyone. As Kendall said, today we're looking at language and literary analysis using Smart Notebook. Most of what I'm talking about today is stuff that I kind of developed in the classroom before I came into this industry. I was a high school teacher for quite a number of years, teaching ancient Greek and Latin, and from junior students in year 7 up to year 12 students, I started using Smart Notebook in order to do this. And throughout that time, I had some frustrations, some challenges, and I gradually got to learn what worked for me. And so I'm hoping that some of my tricks about customizing your notebook experience can improve the experience for you as well. So the first part is not so much about language and literature. It's more about setting yourself up for success in teaching languages and literature. And then in the second part, we're looking more specifically at some techniques in teaching those subjects. So I'm sure everyone has heard this quote before, that we are all teachers of literacy. And as you will have seen in the last few years, the Australian curriculum, for example, literacy is very deeply embedded across all different key curriculum areas. The challenge, and this has been a challenge for a very, very long time, is engaging reluctant language and literacy learners. Particularly in languages, you are always going to have reluctant learners when it's a subject area that students have to take on. Obviously, English in terms of literacy and foreign languages, they're mandated by different curricula, and you are always going to come across reluctant learners, just like every other subject. So I'm hoping that some of the things where we are looking at making our learning more visible, they can be used to help engage those reluctant learners. And speaking of course, we have this work here, which has been quite influential in the last few years, making thinking visible. This is coming out of Harvard's Project Zero. And really the idea behind this, aside from a lot of thinking routines, is really bringing that visualization of learning and learning outcomes into the classroom in order to improve engagement and also in order to deepen thought. The main thing that I began to do and began to have more of a feeling of success in the classroom using Notebook was really starting to make myself at home in it. So now whenever I get a new computer or a new machine, I will download and log into Notebook, and I'll set Notebook up exactly as I like it. There are certain things that I know I use a lot, and so I totally customize my Notebook. There are a few reasons why I do this. One of the reasons is when you have everything set up exactly like you want it, you are going to improve the flow of your lesson. You're not going to be reaching outside of Notebook to find things. You're not going to be fiddling around as much as you otherwise would be. Because of that, you're increasing time on task for your students. The less you are fiddling around, the more that you are concentrated on the content or the delivery of that content. As a result of that increased time on task, you're also going to increase student engagement because there are fewer distractions and fewer moments where you yourself are distracted. So that's limiting distractions. And of course, it will decrease teacher frustration. As everybody would know, when teachers are frustrated with technology, they're not at their best. It is extremely common to get frustrated with technology. I myself still do it, and you're not on task. You're not in that, really key teaching state if you're just frustrated with what you're working with. So here are some tips in order to make sure you're teaching efficiently. I always like to think of working smarter and not harder. These are some of the things that we're going to look at today. So customizing our pens. This was one of the things that really annoyed me before I looked up and learned how to do it. Was there were a number of colors and pen settings that I knew I used all the time, and just changing my colors and thicknesses and transparencies over and over and over really annoyed me. And so I learned how to customize my pens, and a whole lot of frustration just went away. Likewise, customizing your fonts. Exact same reason. You don't want to be changing fonts and colors and sizes every time you want to type something. Customizing your toolbar. This will give you all of the things you need right up the top here. So there are a number of common tools that I use all the time that aren't up the top here by default, so I have to go looking for them. So what I'll show you is how to make sure that those tools that you use frequently are up here so you can go straight to it rather than searching around. A big one is preloading themes, pages, and widgets in your gallery. It's very common that teachers create something cool, a little tool or an activity, and then they have to go back to their old notebook that they remember creating it in, copy and paste into a new notebook. That's really frustrating. So using the gallery and my content, we can remove a lot of that going back and forward. Learning keyboard shortcuts. This is something that still frustrates me when I see people using the mouse for absolutely everything. There's a known thing in computing that the more you use the keyboard and the less you use your mouse, the more efficient you are. It's much easier and quicker to do things via the keyboard than via the mouse. So we will have a look at a few useful and common keyboard shortcuts within Notebook. And finally, stay within Notebook as much as possible. What I mean by this is, if you know that you are going to be reaching around for different documents, websites, all that sort of thing, you're going to be minimizing or closing Notebook, opening the browser, typing in an address or finding a link, and all of that fiddling around is also downtime. It's when you're not teaching and the students aren't engaging. So if you could bring everything possible into Notebook itself, if Notebook becomes the access point for all of your content, your workflow is far, far better. So these are some of the things that we'll be looking at in the first part of the webinar. Okay, first up, customizing pens. This is the first thing I do because I use language and analyzing language and marking and annotating things up. I use my pens a lot. So let's say I know that for some reason in my teaching, I like to use a big, thick purple pen all the time. If I weren't customizing my pens, what I would have to do is come up here and choose my pen. I'll have to come and choose my color. I'll need to come and choose the size of my line. I may, if I want a dotted line, for example, and let's say for some reason I also want it slightly transparent. I've had to do a lot of clicking and a lot of messing around there in order to just start working. If I can customize it, all that would take is one push or one click, and I'm already onto the pen that I know I want. So let's learn how to do that. I'll get rid of that. So let's set up our pen exactly as we want it. So what I'm going to do is, let's say I'm going to choose this preset here. These options, these are not the colors that you can use. These are actually different presets. So I want to change this and customize this little button to a certain pen. So I'm going to set it up. Let's make it purple. Let's say I want a thin line with dashes that is fully opaque. There we go, that's my pen. I want to keep that. What I'm going to do is come over to the menu on the left right here and click on this little tab with the A. That is our Tool Properties tab. Now, if I come down and click Save Tool Properties, then that pen is now locked on that button right here. Every time I want that purple dotted line, I just use that button and there it is. Now I do that for all of these, so I have 8 different pens, always ready to go. Another nice thing that some people don't make use of is the transparency of your pen. So if you want to do some annotation where, take that back to where it was, if you want to do some annotation behind text, but you still want your text to be nice and legible, you can make your pen transparent. And oops, let's go back to the correct pen there. And now you'll see when I annotate, I'm not getting in the way of the text the same way as I would if it were totally opaque. I can even become much more transparent here. And what you can see is that it's very faint and it's not getting in the way of the text. So if I'm marking up a lot, like let's say I am looking at, let's say alliteration in a certain text, and I'm circling letters a lot, like my P's and my T's here. There's a lot of ink there, but it's not overwhelming the text. It's just subtly reminding me or subtly reminding the students that that alliteration is occurring there, but all of the text is still legible. And speaking of pens, another really fun pen is the text pen. So the text pen is great for teaching literacy and teaching grammar. It actually does two things. The text pen obviously does convert your writing to text, but it can also edit text. Doing this on the screen itself, and especially doing it using different colors, is a great way of making thinking visible, because rather than just talking about words, you're really able to bring them to life on the screen. So let's have a look. I've selected my text pen from my menu just here, and now I can simply write a sentence. So let's say the horse is big. As you can tell, my writing is awful. Luckily enough, the software is smart enough that it will realize what I'm doing and it will compensate for me and give me that text. Now what I'm going to do to edit it is I'm actually going to choose a different color. This really makes it stand out to see what has changed and what hasn't. The ink gestures, if you will, that are used to edit text are ones that are very familiar from if you have ever marked a student's writing. You know, inserting a word by using an upwards arrow like this, inserting a space with a vertical line, deleting text with a horizontal line, or replacing a word with a circle. So we can be doing this not just to correct writing, but also to add, and we can be using this as a method of direct instruction as well. So we could say the horse is big. Okay, big isn't a very descriptive word. What sort of word is big, by the way? It's a describing word. Okay, so it's an adjective. What could we do to make this more descriptive? How could we replace this adjective with another adjective? So let's replace, circle that to replace it. So let's replace that with gigantic. There we go. However, you'll see that now I'm missing a space between is and gigantic. So I'm going to use my vertical line. There we go. My replaced word is now in red, so we can see what has changed. What we can do then is go to another color. So the horse is gigantic. We've got that adjective there as an attributive adjective. Let's have a predicative adjective. The something horse. What could we insert? So we're going to do our arrow in order to insert our text like that. Say the grey horse is gigantic. Again, we'll just need a space there. And now, of course, what we could be doing is other things. Okay, so where's our verb? What is a verb? It's a doing word, isn't it? So our verb then is here. Let's make that from past tense into present tense into simple past tense. So we're going to replace that by circling it. Then we can ask the class all about the past tense of the verb to be. And here we have it. We have a more fleshed out, visible way of editing that text, and also using it not just as a visual editing process, but using this as a platform for direct instruction as well. As we are explaining it, the students are also starting to analyze that, break it apart, and see the different bits of the meta language of grammar. Now, customizing fonts. Exactly the same as customizing text, customizing fonts is a real time saver. So rather than continually having to choose the font and the size and the color that we want, we can set up a number of different font presets. So what I'm going to do is select the text tool here. I will choose whichever of these buttons I want to change. And now, just like with the pen, I'm going to go to Tool Properties right here. And now I set up the font as I like it. Let's say I want this dark red. For some reason, who knows why, I use Magneto a lot, and it is always very big for a reason. And now I click Save Tool Properties. Now that is my preset. So if I want to add some font here, I'll click the preset that I want. and I only have to set it up once. So I can have 6 presets for my fonts just here, and I can have 8 presets for my pens, as you saw. A great time saver. Now, this is what I mentioned previously. This is how I can set up my toolbar. Obviously, I want all of the tools that I use frequently up here all the time so I can grab them. And in fact, just doing what I've been doing in the webinar so far has been frustrating me because there's a certain tool just here, and it happens to be the clear ink tool that I removed. So I can show you how to add it. Because I've removed it, I've been lacking it, and that frustrates me. So in order to remove that teacher frustration, let's customize our toolbar. In order to do this, we're going to come up to the settings cog just here in the top right-hand corner of the window. When I click on that, here are all my tools. If I want to pin one of these up to my toolbar, I just find the one I want. This one is clear ink, and drop it wherever I like. And now that becomes my toolbar. Other ones that are not, and clear ink, by the way, is my favorite button, but that's not there by default. Other things that I could put up is I could put up full screen. Now, as you'll see, I dropped the clear ink like this, making it a big button. But if I like, I can also make it a half button. So I tend to have the ones that I use a lot as full buttons, the ones that I don't use as much as half buttons. Let's also grab the smart recorder, because we're going to be using that later. And if you have subject-specific tools, so if you are a mathematics teacher and you're going to be using the compass all the time, or the geodryac all the time, or the protractor, you may want to drag them up so that they're right there as well. I'm not a maths teacher. I don't like compasses. In order to get rid of something from here, I can just grab that tool, drag it back down, and now it's gone. Perfect, back where the compass belongs. Now we have our keyboard shortcuts. Everyone should know the basic keyboard shortcuts that you use. Things like Control-C for copy, Control-V for paste, Control-A for select all. But there are also a few ones that are useful in Notebook itself. So Control-G allows us to group objects. So let's just say I've got 2 objects, but I want them to be treated as one object. What I can do is just select the 2 of them and press Control-G, and now that's one object. Control-K, I can also lock that object in place. So if I select that and press Control-K, that's now locked. It stays where it's meant to be. And that's really important, as we're going to see soon. If I want to unlock it, Control-J. If I want to make a new page, a blank page, Control-M. And also I can navigate through my tools using the numbers 1 to 8. So if I'm currently, let's say, drawing with my mouse, but I want to go back to my cursor, I can just go Control-1, and now I'm back. Likewise, the pen tool, Control-2, and the text tool, Control-8. They're all common ones as well. Okay, so now we're moving more so into language and literacy teaching. One tip that I suggest is using color. Using Smart Notebook, the great thing is this gives us an infinite or an almost infinite number of colors at our disposal. We don't have to worry about ordering huge packs of whiteboard markers from the office. We can use as much color as we want, and it doesn't cost us anything. So one way that we can do that is actually to categorize different parts of speech with different colors. Depending on what you teach, different languages, different subjects, it will work differently for you. But if I'm teaching the basics of English grammar, what I can do is start color coding. If I start this, let's say I get students in year 7, and we have to teach them English grammar in order to teach them Latin grammar. If I start in their minds that in my class, our nouns are green, our verbs are red, and our adjectives are blue, as we start to move through texts, move through the works that we're dealing with. And of course, I've set all of my pens up perfectly, so it's very easy to change between them. That becomes a shorthand, a color vocabulary of different parts of speech. So the, what would you say? The recognition, of different parts of speech is becoming faster and faster to the point where it's automatic. So this is a way that we could do this, starting from the basics, on the board or on the screen. So Steve kicks the shiny ball. What we want to do is analyze this grammatically. And the word analyze comes from a Greek word, which means to free. When you're analyzing language or analyzing literature, what you're doing is breaking apart the components and then freeing them. So here I could identify my nouns first. Now, what I could do is say, Steve kicks the ball, ask the class, okay, who can identify the noun here, or the nouns? And someone might say Steve is a noun, someone might say the ball is a noun. Getting back to Project Zero's Making Thinking Visible, one of the good things that it does promote is the use of these thinking routines. The one that I used the most was a very, very simple one. It's certainly something that they did not invent, and it is WMYST, W-M-Y-S-T. What makes you say that? If I ask the class, okay, where are our nouns? And they simply say, oh, the nouns are Steve and ball. That's great. It's correct. One student has shown me that they understand what a noun is. But if I ask them what makes you say that, and they say, well, Steve is a person. I know that a noun is a person, a place, or thing. Likewise, the ball is also a noun. I looked at the other words. None of those seem to be actual concrete entities. What I've done is I've made that student revisit the basis of what a noun is, the idea of a noun, rather than just saying this is a noun. They have examined their own thinking, and by deepening that thought, it's also helping all of the rest of the students, because we've just had a student explaining the concept of a noun, and I haven't had to. The students listen to each other, and the students are almost peer teaching as you go through a lesson. Let's have a look at the next one. Amy throws the rubbish into the bin. Again, so we've got our nouns in green. Amy, okay, she's a person, place, or thing. So she's a noun, throws the rubbish. Rubbish is a noun, into the bin. Okay, great. We've got our verb. Okay, so where is our verb here? The student might identify throws. Okay, what makes you say that? Why aren't these other words verbs? Okay, so obviously our verb is a doing word, yada, yada. But then I might say, wait a second, I can bin something, can't I? I can bin that idea in order to go with a different one. Isn't bin a verb? And they could say no. I might say, okay, well, what makes you say that? Why isn't bin a verb here? And they say, well, it's because of the preposition into. Into is starting a prepositional phrase. So into needs to be then governed by a noun. The preposition needs to have a noun that it is modifying. So here, bin is our noun rather than our verb. Great. And then going further, we can be using the same color vocabulary. As you can see here, my nouns are still, my verbs are still green. But okay, so let's find our verb. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Okay, so our verb will be compare, but also it's a modal verb because it's shall. I shall compare. So what is the subject here? And how would I know? I'll ask a student. The student might say, well, the subject is the thing doing the verb. Yep, so our verb we've said is shall compare. Who or what is doing that verb? I compare. I shall compare. Okay, so that's our subject. Wonderful. Our direct object, what is it to start with? Well, it is the thing being done by the action of the verb. So I, subject, compare, verb, the direct object. Wonderful, to a summer's day. And now, because our poetry has meter, it has a metric system to it, with our transparent text, our transparent ink, just like that, we can also scan our lines. And with the scansion, because we're doing this across a whole line of text, we want it to be more in the background. Now, I happen to know that this is iambic pentameter, and students, of course, you have reminded me that penta means 5 in Greek, and iamb is a combination of one short and one long syllable. So shall I compare the two summer's day? Okay, so our foot is that iamb, so that's 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5th foot, 5, that is our penta. So fantastic. Now, in terms of senior Latin, when I started using Notebook in order to teach this, my page kind of looked like this. So it was just blank with text. And we would go through, we would write notes, we would put literary devices and grammar notes and things like that. And then once we finished this part of the text, I would come down here, I would click expand page, and then I would paste the next bit, and then go to extend page again and paste the next bit. Essentially what I was doing is I was seeing my page here as a Word document where I just keep going down and down and down and down. Then I thought, okay, great, we've got all these notes, we've got that. I'm going to convert this to a PDF and give it to my students so they have a record of it. Well, this is what that PDF looked like. It looked like this. Because I was looking at this as a Word document rather than essentially more like a PowerPoint. What I should have been doing is doing my one passage here, going to another page and doing another passage and then another page. Essentially, it's more like a PowerPoint. So if my main part of the lesson looks like this, I'll then do another page, and the PDF that I can spit out at the end looks like that. That's workable, that's usable. It doesn't look like that mess. Okay, so what do we have here? Here we have what the page might look like at the end of a number of lessons where we're looking at this particular part of text. As you can see, this is visually a lot more interesting than that. Text on a blank white page is how Latin has been taught for hundreds of years now, but we have the tools to make things much more interesting. We're able to use color to color code different things here. So we've got our verbal construct here, we've got our ablative absolute, we've got our agreement of adjectives, we've got our scansion in our lovely transparent pen. We can also bring in all sorts of different things. So we can bring in an image here. The part of this is part of Virgil's Aeneid, which is about a guy named Laocoon and his 2 sons being attacked by a giant snake. And this is the sculpture in the Vatican Museum that depicts this very scene. So what I've done is, rather than, I know that reading this really famous piece and connecting it with a really famous sculpture, I know that I'm going to be talking about that, right? So rather than now going to my browser, searching Laocoon Vatican sculpture and then finding photos of it, I've just put one in right here. I don't have to go outside of Notebook. And if I do have to go outside, there's another really easy way I can do that. So here is a YouTube video about Laocoon and his sons. I didn't have to open my browser. I didn't have to search anything. It was very easy. All I had to do was find the video that I wanted and copy that address there. Now I can go back into Notebook Let's say I've got another picture that I like. For the sake of it, let's say I want some apples taking me to that video. Now, all I have to do is right click on that picture, or I can click that drop down menu in the corner there and come down to link. Now we've got the address. I can paste in that address, and I will always suggest, rather than corner icon, because that means you have to click on a little icon down in the corner, select object, and that makes the entire object a link. So if I press OK now, anytime I tap or press on that picture, I'm going to that external site. But I can also make a link to a page in this file. So if I decide when I tap this, I want to go back to my title page, I can link to that right here, or link to a file. If I want this now to open a Word document or a PDF, I can link to the file, or link to an attachment that's within the notebook itself. This is what I was talking about by staying within Notebook as much as possible and not always scrambling into the browser or the Finder or things like that. You can bring everything you need into Notebook and use Notebook as your gateway to other things. It improves your workflow. Okay, let's say goodbye to the apples. There's another really important thing here, which is to lock your text. And I'll show you why. That's now a total mess. Whenever you're dealing with text and you're annotating and things like that, you're going to want to lock it. Otherwise, you're going to come into situations where this is really messed up. There have been a lot of times, and I learned this the hard way over a long time, where everything is working fine, and then I scroll down. When I'm scrolling, I accidentally move the text a little bit, and then I continue writing at the bottom, and now nothing matches up. And I have to do it again after class, or I have to mess around trying to move different bits of ink. It's really, really frustrating. So always remember to lock your text when you're using it. Now, you also remember that there is a keyboard shortcut for this. Rather than right-clicking, coming to lock and clicking lock in place, as you'll see here, I can just type Control-K. So I'll select what I want to lock, which is my text, press Control-K. Perfect. Now I can't move that text unless I unlock it. So with all of this sort of thing that we've been looking at, I've been suggesting that we can use all of these techniques of analysis as a way not just for direct instruction and just teaching, but also getting towards students doing this as well. So by the time my Latin students are in year 12, they're able to do all of this themselves as well. So what I would often do is I would apportion different passages. So for example, I might give one student 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these 5 lines. The homework is to go home, translate this, analyze it, work it apart, pull it apart, put it back together, and then when they come to class, they're going to analyze this in this way, visually, in front of the other students. It's peer teaching. They are then talking to each other about, well, so are you sure that Tanta and Insania go together because this A, we don't know if it's long or short, et cetera, et cetera. And it ends up developing a dynamic where the students are working together. They're much more independent. They're not relying on me. They are basically doing exactly what I was doing. I have modeled that, but now my students are taking over. And that's what this gets to. This is the gradual release of responsibility model. The idea with this is that ideally what we're doing is moving from teacher responsibility at the start to student responsibility by the end. This hooks in obviously with things like constructivism and student-centered learning, that with the old transmissionist model of teaching where the teacher has a jug filled with information and knowledge and they are just pouring that into the students, really what we're doing is trying to get more towards the student being at the center of that process and the teacher letting go of that responsibility, to an extent letting go of that control as well. But we can't just let our students teach themselves. And this is where my clear ink tool comes in handy. Perfect. We're not just letting them teach themselves. Obviously, at the start, we have to model this. We have to show them how to do the processes and the thinking processes that we want them to exhibit. So we start with focus lessons. I do this. I, as the teacher, am showing the class how this works. And then, as you can see, as we go down, the volume in these sections becomes less for the teacher. So the teacher is taking less responsibility over time for the learning, and the student is taking more responsibility over time. So we start with I do it, and then we do it together. So rather than just showing them how to analyze the Latin on the screen, now we might be saying, okay, what would you do here? I could be asking them who thinks this is this, who can suggest where the direct object is, and then you do it together is where they're now collaborating. I am not the guiding force. I can be a facilitator here. I can be helping, I can be advising, but really the students are getting towards their own agency in the learning process. And by the end of it, I'm still there as a guide, as a facilitator, but the students are doing it for themselves. By the time they get to their final exams, whether it's HSC or IB or VET or what have you, they are actually doing it alone. They're in that exam room by themselves. We have ultimately moved from us doing the teaching to them doing the learning and embodying what they've learned. Another really nice tool, you'll remember that I put this up onto my toolbar earlier, is the Smart Recorder. This was a tool that was used very well by a number of people when distance learning was occurring during COVID, because what we can have with a Smart Recorder is we can be taking both audio and video of whatever is happening on my computer. So if I'm doing a lesson where I'm teaching students how to scan text or something like that, or even if I'm taking them through even a PowerPoint or something on my browser, I can be recording that with both audio and video using the Smart Recorder. So if I press Smart Recorder here, you'll see that this pops up. This is our Smart Recorder window. There is a little down arrow next to the record button. So here I can record the desktop, which is the entire screen. I can record just an area. So if I just want to record, let's say the middle of the screen here, I can, or I can record a window. So for example, just one tab within my browser, but not all the other stuff. In general, I would be recording my desktop because I want them to see everything on my screen. Now, the great thing is, I'm going to start recording here. So the students, when they watch this video, they're going to see my screen, they're going to see my mouse, they're going to see whatever I'm writing on the screen. However, this doesn't just work in Smart Notebook. If I now want to go and show them something in the browser, it's actually recording the whole thing because I pressed Record Desktop. Now, once I'm finished, I can press Stop. That's going to be named by time and date. Now press Save. What I can do with that video now is upload that to Google Classroom or email out a link, cloud storage. The students then have that resource. Really good for showing students something that you need to explain to them visually. How to do something on a computer, how to read something on a map or a chart. Fantastic for mathematics as well, because you're actually able to visualize rather than just hear or read about what's going on. Okay. Here now we're getting towards the sort of thing that you might do in Year 9, Year 10 English. Once more, what we're doing is drawing things into Notebook rather than putting them outside of Notebook. So you'll see before when I had the image of Lalkawan, I used a link to take that out to YouTube for me. The other thing that I can do is bring YouTube into Notebook itself. So here I've embedded a video from YouTube of an actor reading the beginning of this poem. So I can play that while we're still able to see the text. And I can also put that up into full screen as well. In order to do that, I come over to my puzzle piece right here. And now, rather than having to go and find this video on YouTube and copy and paste, what I can do is simply come up to video search just here. Within video search, one of the great things is this is powered by Bing, and it is a safe search, so no adult content will come up, but it also gets rid of ads, it gets rid of suggested videos on the right-hand side, and it gets rid of comments down the bottom. So I can simply search for a video and embed it. So if I search for Doomed Youth, is what this poem is. Here we have a lot of different videos that I can preview, and then I can bring in. So I can preview that by clicking the play button just here, see how good it is. And then when I want it, I'm just going to click on it to select it, and then click Add Video. And now that's going to appear within my page. This is really good because poetry, language, and all kinds of literature are not just about words on a page. Even the Latin that I was showing you earlier, here for example, this wasn't really made to be read, it was made to be read aloud. And so with literature like Shakespeare, when you're reading Shakespeare on a page, you're not getting everything that there is, because the sound of literature and the sound of language is a very important component. So now we can have our video here playing, we can hear this actor reading everything, and then we're able to see, for example, let's see my pen, there we go. We can have the actor reading, and then we can pause and say, okay, so what literary techniques can you identify? Well, did you hear the alliteration on T, so who die as cattle? The stuttering, rifles, rapid, rattle. So we've got alliteration on T, and of course we've got alliteration on R. So monstrous anger of the guns, stutter, ring, rifles, rapid, rattle. So the sounds here, the alliteration on T and R, are evoking a sound picture of the machine guns of the First World War. Obviously with T here, we've got also patter out, their hasty orisons. Just a few further things. Built into these newer versions of Notebook, since I started using it, are some really fun tools for randomization. So the greatest tools for randomization are the dice that we have here and the spinner. So with my dice, all I have to do is come to my gallery, and then I'm simply going to search for dice. And now, because these are interactive dice, they're going to be under interactive and multimedia. I've got a dice, I can just drag that in. Now, just having a dice in order to get a random number is really great. When we click on it, it rolls, but we can also do some great things, as you can see here. So for example, we can have multiple dice that will roll at the same time. We can have text dice, like you see here. We can also have image dice if we want to drag images into here. So an example of how this could be used in the language classroom. So on this dice, we have the person and number. So first person, second person, third person, singular or plural. Here we have a tense of the verb, and here we have a verb itself. So first person singular, I might roll all of these together, and then a student might come up and they supply the right form. So third person singular. So third person, she, he, or it, singular. It's not they, it's she, he, or it, singular. Great. Pluperfect. Okay, so that's prior to perfect. Perfect is I have eaten. Pluperfect would be I had eaten. Perfect, that's to bring, so I had brought. That's right, it's an irregular verb. It's not I bring, I will bring, I bringed, I have bringed. It is irregular. So he, she, or it had brought. Great. With the spinner, obviously, we're also going to go back to our gallery and search for spinner. And now interactive and multimedia, we can drag that out. Here, I thought I'd put in some Greek to lighten the mood. These are all different Greek verbs. And so what I could say is, all right, let's all create a sentence with the verb echo as our main verb, and then there'll be a subordinate clause with pegaino. Lovely. And we've got our tip. Save your widgets in your gallery. So you don't have to be recreating these all the time. If you come to your gallery, at the very top, you're going to see My Content. So let's say I know that this particular spinner I'm going to want to use all the time. I'm just going to unlock that so I can drag it around. So I can press Control J, or I can right click. If I grab my spinner and then drag it into My Content, now, no matter what I'm doing, wherever I am in Notebook, different files, I can come to My Content, find the spinner that I want, and drag it out. Here's one that I created earlier with the Harry Potter houses. Okay, just a few more things in order to conclude. Smart Lab is a gamification piece that is within Smart Notebook. I'm sure you've had a lot of webinars all dedicated to Smart Lab, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. However, the Shout It Out tool, just down here, this is a great one when I was talking about reluctant learners. So with Shout It Out, especially for discussion and getting people's opinions, there's often that classroom dynamic where you have the really keen student at the front putting up their hand, dominating the discussion. By doing Shout It Out and keeping it anonymous, we can prevent embarrassment. So there's lower barrier of entry. You know, a student is going to be putting their idea out without fear of judgment and disrupting that usual dynamic. So what that might look like is I can ask my students, what are the main themes in the Aeneid? That's the Latin text we were looking at earlier. And they are able to put forward these ideas. They might not know if they're right or not. They might not be confident in that idea. Perhaps they never would have said it. But if somebody says ambition, that's actually a really interesting thing to discuss, because I may not have said ambition myself, but actually that's an interesting take. Now let's talk about how we can view this particular literary work through the lens of ambition. By taking away the names, we are democratizing the access to that discourse. Just a few other examples of how we could use Smart Lab for our language and literature. As you will have seen many times, the super sort game is absolutely wonderful. So we can be sorting out different parts of language. So seeing the difference between adjectives and adverbs, for example. That's a great and really fun way to do that. As teachers of language, fill in the blanks. Traditionally, these fill in the blanks or closed passages have been extremely annoying to make, but they're wonderful. So with the ability to make these with Smart Lab, it's a real game changer because we can do them so quickly and efficiently. All I've done here is typed in this text, clicked on the ones that I want to be blank, select my theme, and that's done. It's that easy. And I can also push that out to student devices. With things like the rank order, where we're putting things in a certain order, largest to smallest or first to last, that's great for things like the sequence of events in a narrative that we're studying. obviously with our flashcards, these have traditionally been the mainstay of teaching vocabulary. And again, they're so easy to make, and they are visually so appealing as well. And then finally, with match 'em up, here we're matching one thing with another. So we might match a word in the target language with that same word in English. But here we're using a technique and an example, or sorry, a description of that technique. So we might say that illusion, we can discuss what all of these are, and then perhaps I can make a list of examples over here. Just because you are using Smart Lab, it doesn't mean you still can't write and annotate. Anyway, as I said, I wanted to leave Smart Lab not as the focus here, because Smart Lab has been covered so well by so many other people. I hope that that will give a few ideas about how to customize your notebook, and maybe some ideas about how to enliven some language and literature teaching. I'll say thank you, and I'll hand back to Kendall now. If anyone is interested in getting in touch, please feel free to email me, chris.ransom@integrateav.com.au.
Awesome, thanks, Chris. That was an awesome webinar.
Thank you.
So we do have some questions as well. So we have a question that has come through.
Mm-hmm.
And I will welcome anybody else to ask any questions now if they have any questions they would like me to ask Chris. So I'll read out this question here, and it's a bit of a, it's got kind of 3 questions in one. So can you access the notebook directly through the smartboards? As in, can you log into the smartboard to access all your presentations, or does it have to be through a computer, your computer?
Yeah, so if you have a Smart account, so you have a license for Notebook, if you put those notebooks up onto the Smart Learning Suite online as an online lesson, what you are able to do is log into the Smartboard by pressing the little sign in button, the top left-hand corner of the home screen, log in using that same email address, and then through your files, you are able to get those from Smart Learning Suite online. So yes, you take your notebook, put it up to Smart Learning Suite online, and then sign into the panel.
Awesome. Okay, I hope that answers. That was from Vivian. Hope that answers your question, Vivian. And please reach out if you do need some more info. But that pretty much definitely answers it. And we've had just a comment here, a jam-packed session with ideas. So thank you, Chris. That was a message from Elizabeth.
Thank you.
So I'll give everyone 30 seconds or so. So I can see a few people typing. But yeah, there was definitely some great tips at the start there, pinning the tools. I definitely love pinning tools and customizing my toolbar, that's for sure.
Well, it just came out of using Notebook for years and gradually finding all the things that I wanted that I couldn't do, and I ended up just having to teach myself how to do all that stuff. So I made it more efficient for myself. Yeah,
I customize and bookmark things that I use regularly everywhere, especially in Notebook. It's, getting into a flow state of teaching, you're in the flow state. You don't want to be fumbling around trying to find new tools, and like what you said, there's nothing worse than being in that flow, in your groove of teaching, and getting frustrated with technology. And that's exactly what Smart software does, tries to keep you in that flow. Okay, I don't think any other questions are coming through, so I'll do a quick wrap up. So thanks so much for your time, Chris. And anyone that wants to, I'll just bring Chris's bio slide back. Anyone that might want to contact Chris after the webinar about anything at all, you can at chris.ransom@integrateav.com.au. His email's there just in the bottom right-hand corner. Okay, I will do a quick wrap up. So you can get free resources, free ready-made lessons if you go to our Smart Exchange. We also call that SMEX, if you've ever heard us refer to it as SMEX. And the link for that is just at the bottom there. It's content.smarttech.com. And for those who, for Smart 360s first. So Smart 360, if you haven't seen it yet, I definitely urge you to jump on and have a look. It's our new virtual platform. It has loads of professional development. You can go into the auditorium there. We've got keynotes. It gets updated regularly with all the latest trends, and also we get feedback from existing users on what they want to see, the professional development they want to see, and we do get feedback from Australian teachers as well, and you will find some Australian aligned curriculum in there as well. And you can go into the research room, you can fill up, there's even a virtual swag bag, you can fill up your virtual swag bag with all the research, as much research as you like. And from the research room, you can download PDFs which directly save to your swag bag, and you can have that there for when you want to reference any research. And then we've also got our exhibit hall as well. So exhibit hall, this is a zoomed in version of, so you'll see an aerial view of all the stands, like what you'd see when you walked into a real trade show, and then you can go in and click on whichever ones you'd like to look at it, and then it zooms in like what you can see here, and it has all of the beast that is smart all broken into nice little booths, so you can go in there and navigate around and have a look at any of the areas that you might not have had a chance to look at yet or navigate yet with Smart, and you want to jump in and have a look deeper into that. So this is right now you're looking at the at-home education and games and videos. So you see there along the bottom, you've got all your links in there, so you can click on there and then that pops out with further information under each. So it's just a really nice way of understanding exactly everything that Smart offers. And then there's our booth there, that's the Australian booth. So you can jump on in there and have a look at the Australian aligned, curriculum aligned resources. We've also got our webinar series there. That's got all the past recordings from 2019 and 2020, and then from last term as well. And you've also got links to all our Facebook groups, and you can also contact us there as well. Okay, so for those of you who might have come in a bit late in the beginning, you can download an attendance certificate for this webinar. If you just log into train.smarttech.com, click on the blue certification box to learn more, navigate to this webinar, and then at the end of the webinar, like what you can see here in the bottom left, there'll be a Mark Complete button, which will automatically generate you a PDF certificate with your name on it. Okay, our Inspire Greatness Conference, the date has been announced, which we're very, very excited to finally announce. There's lots of planning going on behind the scenes, and there'll be loads more information to come. But for now, mark the calendars for September 10th. That's Friday. I believe it's the third last Friday of term 3. And we will be having a face-to-face event, which we're really excited about because obviously there has been hardly any face-to-face events. So we're really excited to go back to face-to-face, and we will be having it virtually as well, because last year we held it entire virtually and it was just wildly successful. Everybody loved it. We had a lot of attendees engaging, coming back and forth with the content. So it will be available on demand, and you'll be able to access that up to 2 weeks after the actual live portion. That's if you can't make the face-to-face, but we definitely encourage you to make the face-to-face event, because we missed out last year on a face-to-face event. We're going to do our darndest to make this the best conference we've ever put together. So that is our second webinar down for the Ed to Ed series. So next week on Wednesday the 12th, we've got engaging students in project-based learning. And then the week after that, we have special needs students, SLS and zones of regulation on Wednesday 19th. And then the last 2 Wednesdays of the series, the last 2 webisodes will be a 2-part series on the 22 EdTech capabilities reboot. So please join us for those. There's some awesome content across the next 4 that you definitely don't want to miss. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a lovely afternoon, and thank you to anyone also listening to the recording. And thanks again, Chris, if you're still on the line.
I am. Thanks very much, Kendall.
Cool. Have a great one. Thanks, everyone. Bye.